Welcome to the Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. In each episode, we invite experts to share their passion and their leadership journey to help you in your next steps. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Now, here's the host of Next Steps to Leadership, Dr. Stephen Oliver.
Hello and welcome to my podcast, The Next Steps to Leadership. It's really great to see everybody. I'm Dr. Stephen Oliver, or Dr. O, and welcome to the podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to assist newer and younger leaders in taking that next step in their career. I invite senior leaders, learning leaders, human resources leaders, nursing managers and leaders, consultants, business owners, to talk a little bit about some of their career, the successes they've had, some areas that they learned on, and to give some tips and techniques to younger folks for leadership. Now, this podcast is also for anyone. Anyone can come in that next step. You might be doing something as a mid-level or senior level person and taking a next step in your career. So we welcome all. So I'm very excited to have my guest today, Dr. Mary McNevin. Dr. McNevin is a good friend and colleague of mine, and she agreed to come today. And so I'm really excited about having Dr. McNevin. Let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Mary McNevin. Dr. Mary McNevin is an executive coach, and she's a talent advisor to U.S. Venture. She is a growth-oriented talent management executive. She's got 20 years experience in learning, talent management, succession planning, strategy development. And her mission is to impact lives through learning and to create a competitive advantage through targeted talent initiatives. So very focused here. Dr. McNevin served as the Chief Learning Officer of Signature Health, that's in Louisville, Kentucky. And she's also been the Global VP of Talent Development and Organization Development at McCain Foods. At McCain Foods, she launched the company's first global center for serving 55 facilities on 6 continents. Pretty rigorous program there. Dr. McNevin earned her doctorate of education in work-based learning at the University of Pennsylvania through a combined effort of the Wharton School of Business and the Graduate School of Education. And her dissertation was focused on executive coaching in the C-suite. Dr. McNevin also holds an MBA from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and a Master's of Science in Education from the University of Pennsylvania. So very glad to have you today, Dr. McNevin. Welcome. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Stephen.
Well, first and foremost, I just wanted to see what you're up to these days.
Oh my gosh.
What are some things that you're going to? And that's kind of a broad question.
Yeah. Well, I'm working part-time at U.S. Venture. I was the VP of Talent, and about a couple of years ago, I was going through a Design Your Life certification, and I thought, why not design my own life? And I thought, this is a time for me to think about if I could create and design my career as I would do it, not just by happenstance, I would not work full-time anymore. I would do executive coaching on the side. I would live in Minnesota in the summer. I'd live in Florida in the winter. And I would have kind of the best of all worlds. I get to do what I love at U.S. Venture, and I get to do what I love with my executive coaching. So that's what I'm doing today. And I find it's kind of the best of all worlds.
That's so exciting. And ironically, I'm seeing a lot of other people trying to pivot and do something like that. This leads me into a question that really wasn't in my list, but do you mind saying a few things about how can you go and do that? How can you have the courage, to go out and design your life? Because we're also tied to jobs and benefits and families. How can you do that? That sounds so cool.
Yeah, it was one of those things I really had to kind of process it for a while. And I said, I really need to stay at my company till I'm a certain age because I live in the United States and healthcare is an issue. So I thought, here's what I've been doing. I've been working as the vice president of talent. I love what I do. And then there's parts of my job that I didn't love what I do. So I thought if I could create the job, it's really a win for the company because now I'm able to continue my work in the areas that I'm good and strong at. And then some of the areas that they could give to somebody new and up and coming, they could do that at a lower price point. So it was a win for the company, a win for me, and it's a win for those coming into the air into my roles, future roles. So I
Well,
win.
go ahead.
What I'd like to propose, I would like to in a year go part-time. I will hire somebody. They will be as good or if not better than me. I will train them for a year. And after that, then I'll go part-time and I'll make sure that I coach and mentor them. And so I had to figure out how it would be a win for the company and not just a win for me. And it really worked out great.
Well, this is very exciting. I think we have another podcast coming on designing your own career. We're going to be talking about networking today, but I think there's another one up on the horizon. So thank you for saying that. Before we jump into networking, do you mind just saying a couple words about what you did as a talent advisor to US Venture? What were some of the things that you did do or are still, advising and coaching them on?
Yeah, no, good question. I still do three things really. Number one is I work with succession planning at the C-suite level. So I work to really set up our internal talent to be potential successors to those C-suiters because there's so many baby boomers that are getting ready to retire. So I do what I can to stack the deck in their favor. I never know who's going to be up against them as we recruit for those roles, but I can do what I can to help them be the best candidates they can be. So that's number one. Number two is I do help with executive recruiting when we have to look external for talent at the C-suite level. And number three is I really help guide and coach the leadership development team if they're working on a leadership program or maybe it's a training program in a certain area. I will be kind of a coach or a guide on the side for the up and coming talent development team. So three things.
Okay, that's fantastic. Well, maybe that's yet another business for you in your next step,
Yeah.
helping to stack the deck to help people move forward in their career. So that's so exciting. Fantastic. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. So as we discussed, as we prepared for this podcast, you wanted to talk a little bit about networking.
Yeah.
And networking is so powerful.
Yes.
And so first and foremost, Mary, what does networking mean to you?
Well, networking means really being connected to the right people to help you do your job better or do life better. And it's really a way for you to make life easier on yourself and on others. So when I think about it, I think how much I learned through networking. I learned because I have connections with people in different industries and I can say, oh, somebody in this industry is doing it this way, or maybe somebody in this industry is doing it this way. So that's one. Number two is I think really networking helps you to collaborate. There's been times where a person in another company and I were building almost the exact same class. So we would build it together and then we would tweak it. That person might do it for a little bit tweaking for their organization. I do it for mine. And sometimes we actually would go into each other's organizations and help each other facilitate classes. And we didn't charge each other for it. It was really a win. But the real reason I think your audience wants to know about networking is it's really about amplifying their visibility to people, letting people know who they are so that they get doors open to them, sometimes before they're even open, that people know or have them on their radar. So networking is a way of helping you to build your brand so doors get opened.
That's great. So how might our younger, newer managers go about getting those doors open, go about getting visibility and starting that really important connection that you mentioned? How might they begin to do that?
Yeah, let me see if I could show you a little bit of a PowerPoint on how you can do a network analysis.
Okay, love it.
Okay, so this is something I walk a lot of our younger talent. I see a lot of talent that's up there or that's really good in their technical role, but they're not so maybe noticed yet in the real world. So it's something that they have to say, hey, here's who I am and here's how I get noted. So let me share my screen here.
That'd be great.
Okay. Here you go. Okay. So let me just kind of walk you through this. So this is really where I have people start. So you might put, just draw this out on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be fancy. And you put yourself right in the middle and you say, who are the people you're working with right now? Maybe it's your division or your team. And then in the left-hand column, who are the people across your organization? And in the right-hand column would be people outside of your organization. And you just start putting names to people that are in your current network. And once you have them, what I like to do is color code them by male, female to make sure that I have them gender balanced. But then I do one more thing, is I make a thick line if it's a really good, strong tie, a thin line if it's a moderate tie, and it's a dotted line if it's a weak tie. So let me tell you about when I started at US Venture. You'll see John down here is the dotted line. John was the CEO and I was brand new. So I didn't have a strong relationship with him. So what I did have to do is come up with a way to really get noticed by him by figuring out what can I do for him. So first of all, if you're a younger leader, draw this map out and you'll start to be able to see what does your network look like today. And then you can analyze your map and say, do you have people in every section on that map? Do you have some that are overfull and some that doesn't have anybody? Do you have male and female? Is it gender balanced? Mm-hmm. I've seen some people that only will network with men if they're men, or only females if they're females, and that's not good. You know, it's really good to have a balance, diverse network. Do you have relationships with people at your boss's level or even higher? And where do you see that you've got some gaps or weak ties? And then once you know them, you start to think about who are the people, who are the top connections that can make a difference in your career? And are there some weak ties that you need to develop into these? And this is where I actually take a change management tool and I create it to a networking tool to say, who do I need to contact with? What impact might they have on my career? Where are they at now? What support do I need from them? And then here's the twist. How can you help them? Not how can they help you, but how can you help them? Because so often when networking, it's people asking, what can you do for me? And instead, I flip it around. What can you do for them? And their concerns, how you might get connected, and their involvement strategy. So remember, John was the CEO. His impact on my career as the vice president of talent was high. His mindset for me was fairly low because I was brand new. And I really wanted high level of support. So I had to think about, what can I do for John? Number one is I can help retain top talent. If I'm working on somebody's career to be the next C-suite, I'm going to help retain them by really working with them, developing them, coaching them. I could also help build the brand, the company's brand image. They didn't have a real strong brand for learning. Well, I started promoting what we were doing on LinkedIn and getting at conferences. And then the other thing is I went to the board twice a year and talked about our talent. The biggest concern I had with John was his time, getting on his radar. I'd set up a meeting, his admin would take it off. So I didn't go directly to John. I had to go to who could help me get connected with him. And I went to 3 people, Lori, Mike, and Eric. And I started to involve them on what I was doing. Built a plan, I pre-sold it. And then one day, lo and behold, I'm sitting in my office and John walks down and he says, hey, I keep hearing I need to meet you. So tell me about yourself.
Oh my God, that's great.
Isn't that great?
Yeah.
So it's a great story. And it's just one of those things where having a tool like what I just shared with you to start to strategically map out who you need to connect with can make such a difference because time is so short. You don't have time to network with everybody.
Right.
So be strategic. Pick out 3. And then I love Zig Ziglar's quote. It was like, you can have everything in life you want if you just help other people get what they want. And so my method is here's what I can do for John. Here's what I can do for the company, not what can John do for me. And that really helped me get connected with our CEO.
Well, your model has like 15 questions going through my brain now. Um,
Yes.
I mean, I love the fact that you have this mapped out and you're circling all those you can network with. What are your thoughts, Mary, about networking with both? You talked about gender, men and women, which is critical. But what
Yep.
about age level? Baby boomers, Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z. Is that
Yeah.
beneficial having multiple types of generations to network with?
Absolutely. And I think you hit on a really important point is people tend to gravitate to people just like themselves,
Yes,
but that
we do.
really limits your thinking. And so for me to be hanging out with somebody that's 25 instead of somebody that's 62,
Mhm.
I learn so much more from
Yes.
them. And frankly, they're learning a little bit from me because I've got decades of experience and I can help them maybe avoid a mistake or two that I've made in my career that I don't want them to make. So it's really a gift. And the other thing is you get to get different perspectives. So
Mhm.
somebody from a whole different department or different part of the company can say, yeah, that sounds really good on paper, but that's not going to work in the real world. Well, wouldn't you rather know that ahead of time before you're rolling something out to an organization? So having a diverse network of people that will tell you the truth can make such a huge difference in
Mhm.
your career. And
Mhm.
if they all think and act like you, that's not a good network.
Mhm. Well, that's powerful advice. And as you were speaking, I was also thinking, in addition, I hang out with some of the 6-year-olds, but I also have younger ones. But what I love about the younger one is their new, fresh ideas to topics that I've been doing for years. And then
Yeah,
also social media and technology. They
right.
really give me insight on those. So
Yeah.
um, that's great advice. The other thing that jumped out in my mind as you were talking is giving back and the genuineness of networking. Networking, I know, takes time. It's not easy.
Right.
Um, I had this colleague who, for a period of years, lost jobs, and he
Mhm.
would only network with me when he was looking for a new job.
Right.
And he would never say, Stephen, what are you doing? What's going on with you? He would
Right.
just, who do you know? So, can you say a little more about giving back and the time
Mhm.
put into this?
Oh, totally. Especially working in HR. I always found a lot of people I would only hear from when they were losing a job. And I
Mhm.
still always help them because I believe in paying it forward. But I think the difference is if you keep that network warm, people can speak to your gifts and your strengths so much better when they don't know you when you're just desperate for a job.
Right, right.
Right? They know that you've had successes. If they only hear about when you've lost a job, that that person might kind of go, why is this person losing their job? Is it bad luck? Or is it something that's happening constantly to them because they're maybe they've got a blind side and they just don't know what's happening. So you want to keep your network fresh when you're on
Mhm.
the up, as well as when you're in the middle, and then you have that network as a safety net when you really need that network.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice, and to be genuine. And I would also just add, really finding out about them. What are they doing? How are they doing
Right,
beyond just their job and what they can do for you?
right,
So, Dr. McNevin, networking is not easy for a lot of people, most people. I'm
right.
an extreme extrovert. I have tons of gatherings and connections, so I'm
Yes,
blessed. But for
yes.
most people, it's hard. It's nerve wracking, and they don't want to be intrusive, and especially some introverted folks. What might you suggest on trying to have the courage and get out there and network? Push yourself.
Yeah, I agree. When you think about an introvert, they might be hesitant to do the network, but if they keep in mind they're networking to see how can they help somebody else instead of somebody help me, it's a lot easier. So what can I be doing to help that other person helps to flip the script. It's a little more daunting if you need the help, and that's when you're not working. I think introverts also have a huge advantage. You know what it is?
Mhm.
They
Uh,
listen.
They
They
look right.
listen. They're not always talking. So people that talk a lot love being around introverts. and they'll be saying, "Oh, that person really listened to me." I think also introverts should seek out other introverts.
Mhm.
Like maybe you and I tend to be introverts, so let's network one-on-one rather than networking in a big group because that's not as comfortable. What I sometimes do is if I'm going to a big conference and I don't know anybody, is I will say, "Hey, do you want to go to this session together?" And if that person's bold and outgoing, my best friend is bold and outgoing. So whenever I go to a social event with her, it's so much easier for me. So an introvert can partner up with somebody that's much more of an extrovert, and that will really help them to network better. So partner up with somebody who's an extrovert, find other introverts, and use your listening skills. And introverts can be some of the best networkers out there.
And that's great you're saying that. I hope I didn't come off negative about introverts.
No, not
I'm
at all.
I'm an academic teacher also, and my introverts who don't say anything, they're quiet, they give the best questions and responses. Oh my
Yeah.
God. And their papers are phenomenal too. So we
Yes.
need both in our lives. So you mentioned conferences. Where might you go to network? I mean, that sounds great.
Yeah. I think number one is like, well, let's just say virtual conference are very common nowadays. So when I'm on a virtual conference, if I can go in and look on the chat to see who's out there that I might know, I might private message them, "Hey, Jessica, I haven't seen you in a long time. Let's catch
Mhm.
up." So that's very easy, especially for an introvert to do that privately. So number one. Number two is figure out what is the best conference in your industry. So depending on what industry you're in, go to those conferences. And sometimes they're at a regional level, sometimes they're at a national or international level. Go to them. And what I also do at a conference is I will set up meetings before I go there. So, Stephen, I see you're going to also be at XYZ conference. Do you want to meet for breakfast on Tuesday at 7:30 at this place? So I make it very easy for the other person. And then I say, I'd love to hear what you're up to. And then at least you've made that touch base with somebody. If you leave it to chance at a conference, it's probably
Mhm.
not going to happen. Sometimes they're so big, you're not going to run into the people. But if you do plan it out in advance, maybe here's who I'm going to have breakfast with, here's who I'm going to have lunch with, and here's who I'm going to have dinner with, at least one day a week, set up some time so you're not eating alone. You're eating with somebody
Mhm.
that you want to build a bridge with. That's a great way to network.
Great example. And I just kind of did that myself. We had the 2024 reunion of our doctoral program. I'm in the same doctoral program as you. We went
Yep.
together at the beginning, but I went back a couple weeks ago, the Penn CLO, Chief Learning Officer reunion. And this program now has been going on about 12, 13 years. And
Right.
I was so astounded at how many new people, fresh faces. And I did what you just said. I set up a lunch, I set up a coffee. And then, we all got to introduce ourselves. And I was the only one who was from our time frame. And everyone's like,
Wow.
oh, I said I was the stage. I was the stage on the stage.
Oh, I love it. But
But it was
you
great.
made it easier for other people because you were proactively doing that.
Hmm.
And I love that because you admitted you're an introvert, but you're a strategic introvert is what that
Yeah.
says to
Well, and I did give out cards. That's one thing I recommend to what you're saying is take your
me. Yes.
business cards, even though we now
Yeah.
are all on LinkedIn. Take your
Right.
business cards.
Yes, that's true. That's true. And then follow up afterwards, like just a quick note, a text
Mhm.
or an email to say it was great meeting with you. Hope to see you again in the near future, or something where here's an article you mentioned this topic. I
Yes.
thought of this article when I read it. I thought of you. Here it is.
Yeah. Any other suggestions on follow up? Because I think that's the biggest thing, follow up.
Yeah. Well, I think, like you said, if you're not connected with them on LinkedIn, get connected with them, send that private note. Two is if you know they're working on something, share this with them. If you know they're looking for a job, here's my philosophy. If somebody is looking for a job, I will help them every step of the way. I will say, hey, do you know this person? Here's this job. Even if I don't think this job is the perfect job for them, I'll still give their name to the recruiter. A, because I'm kind and nice, B, that recruiter will put them in their database for the next job if it's not this. And I don't see it's my job to vet them. It's the recruiter's job to vet them. So I'm always trying to help people when they need it. And I think that pays in long run in dividends. So try to see what you can do to help them when they need it most.
That's fantastic. So Mary, we talked before. Do you have any stories of someone who worked for you, someone you coached, who had a really incredible networking connection?
Yeah, I do that map a lot with people that work in a professional services firm because they need to build their book of business. But let me give you an example of one within an organization. I worked with this woman, and she was new, working for a new boss, and the new boss was taking credit for everything this gal did. Let's just call the gal Alice, okay? So Alice would do the work, but the boss would present it to the executive team. Alice would do the work, and the boss would take it to the leadership team of that function. And so this person met with me and said, my old boss always promoted me, always let me shine. My new boss has kind of taken all the credit. So what can we do? We pulled out that network map, and we started to say, who needs to hear Alice's story? And so we started saying, she did some really cool work that was pretty innovative. And through the networking, we were able to get Alice connected with the CEO to tell the story of how she transformed this process, saved the company a ton of money, but Alice got to tell the story directly to the CEO.
Nice, very nice.
With that, it opened up more doors to several other senior leaders. And so now Alice is now telling her own story, and another senior leader just hired her away from the other boss, who's now giving Alice all the credit for all the work she's doing. So it helped her also get away from that kind of difficult situation with the boss.
Yeah, and that's really tough. You're put in that difficult situation, and so glad you got to step out of that network with the senior leader.
Yeah.
Any story about you, Mary, about some networking and something that happened in your career?
Well, I'll tell you one about my daughter. I'll give you this one. So I have a good network like you from Penn. You have such a good network, right? And there's research that will tell you your weak ties are sometimes better than your strong ties. A lot of times your weak ties will know people that you don't know. Your strong ties have a lot of the same contacts that you have. So when my daughter needed an internship in Tokyo, I hit up my network and I said, hey, Nicole is looking for an internship in Tokyo. And I kind of got quiet, And then, so I reached out to a guy I had met in New York City at a conference a year and a half ago. We sat next to each other at dinner. We connected on LinkedIn. We just had minor communication. So I happened to shoot him the same thing, a very weak tie, in other words.
Right, yeah.
Within 2 weeks, my daughter had an internship in Tokyo.
Oh my God, that's fantastic.
It is. It's so amazing. And this is where weak ties are sometimes more valuable than your strong ties, because they have a network. So not a lot of my ties have connections in Tokyo. Well, you might, Stephen. But it was like, how do we do this networking to help her? So now this map, she's going to graduate in May and is going to be looking for a job there. And I'm going to have her build out this networking map with all the people she knows and how the people she needs to network with, and have her start working this networking map that I showed your audience earlier.
Yes.
So that she can do this herself.
That's fantastic. And not only is she connected here in America, now Asia, Tokyo, Japan, and who knows where she can go.
Yeah.
You just never know. And I love that concept of weak ties. Any other unusual places you might network? Can you think of any unusual places?
I think one of the most unusual ones was I was at the airport at O'Hare waiting to get home. At the time I lived in Appleton, Wisconsin, and we were delayed, which is not uncommon in Wisconsin in the winter. And I saw this guy reading a book, and I had just finished the book. So I went up to him. Well, he was like the CEO of one of the major organizations in the Appleton area. And he had just been speaking to Congress about transparency in
Wow.
healthcare.
Oh
And
my.
we had just the best conversation. And I of course, followed up with him. And then he followed up and he shared with me the speech he had given to Congress. And then I shared that with another person and got those two people connected. So it was just by asking about the book. Did he like reading the book? I had just recently finished it. And he ended up becoming a great contact forever.
Mhm.
Another one would be like a Bill Wigenhorn.
Right.
He is one of the legacy leaders in our industry. And when I first started my job at McCain, he's like, okay, you need to go visit these companies. Here's what we do in this company, and you get this. And he opened up so many doors. And I remember doing a training session on marketing excellence across the world. And one of the British women, then they were always a little bit of a tough crowd, said to me,
Mhm.
whatever you do, don't make them dumber than when I send them to you. And so I went to
Oh boy.
Bill and I we networked and we brought in some of the best faculty from all over the world. So that was my networking using his network to help me. And she then came back and said that was a fabulous experience. So yes.
Well, I think that's our goal as academics and learning leaders and talent advisors is to
Yeah.
make people more enriched and more knowledgeable.
Oh yeah.
Um, so one other thing I wanted to touch on before we end today is you made a comment which I thought was phenomenal, that your networking models change. Can you speak a little bit more to change and how is networking connected to change? Because change is every day, every moment, and inevitable. Any
Yeah.
thoughts about that?
Well, I use the change management tool as part of my networking toolkit, right? So I took a stakeholder map used for change management. And I simply modified it to be more strategic in how I network. And frankly, my network today versus 6 years ago when I started at US Venture is now totally different than when I first started. And the people I want to be networking with as I go more into executive coaching rather than the corporate world continues to change. So you should be doing this network map every 6 months to
Okay.
continue to evolve it as your career changes, as your life changes, etc. Because that's what makes life so much easier.
Yeah. I mean, things change so much. I today got
Yeah.
an email. I'm getting ready to do a new training program with someone, and they just said, "Well, the senior leader left. They still want to do it, but that still is going to stir up some changes." And so, how do I shift and pivot in my training just to address these changes? And that's critical. What you're saying is things change in life as you go. So,
Right.
um, kind of one last thing I wanted to pivot back to two last things. So, what do you do, Mary, if you're trying to network with somebody and you feel it's critical, but it's very difficult? You either can't get through to them, or you get through, but then they don't get back to you. That happens a lot. You have a great conversation, but then it just ends. What might be some strategies to get reconnected to that difficult person?
Well, sometimes they're just busy and
Hmm.
they've forgotten. And I've done that. In fact, I had a contact with somebody over LinkedIn this weekend and I set up a meeting with her in 2 weeks and I had talked to her about this a year ago. It was totally, I forgot, so maybe just a gentle ping.
Yes,
Two is you might be networking with the wrong person. Maybe
correct.
they're one level too high. You might want to look at the level around them. So, like with John, the CEO, I didn't go directly to him. I went to the level below him and I worked with that audience. And then I built my brand with them so that they would open the door to John for me. Because frankly, John trusts them more than me because he didn't know me.
Yeah.
So if you have somebody, let's just say the person's name is Pete. If Pete is challenging to get to, who does Pete trust most in life?
Hmm.
Is it Dana? Is it Tracy? Is it Chuck?
Hmm.
Maybe it's all three. So how do you network with Dana, Tracy, and Chuck?
Yes.
And then they say your name to Pete.
That's really good. You're right. People are busy. And I might add, not taking it personal either.
Right. No, don't take it personal. That's great advice. It's just
Yeah.
they are buried and things happen, life happens, and maybe you are better with the Chucks than the
Mhm.
Petes.
Yeah. Well, one kind of final thing is you've already spoken about this, about follow-up. But again, I just believe follow-up is so critical in life, no matter what it is. And a lot of people get the information they want and then boom, they move on. What's so important about follow-up in this networking? And again, what are some strategies? And you mentioned one or two earlier.
hmm Well, follow-up means that you still have them top of mind. You're still there to help them. You're not asking them for your help. So, for example, recently somebody asked me if I had a class on um, engagement. So I pulled up some things that night. But then, like a week later, I came across a really good HBR article. So then I
Mhm.
shot that to her subsequently.
Yeah.
And then I know that she'll be in Florida this winter. I'll be in Florida this winter.
Mhm.
So in about a month, I'm going to reach out and say, hey, do you want to meet halfway and have lunch? And
Love it.
just, I
Yeah.
have now helped her along her journey instead of me asking for her help. And then if I do need something, I can go back and ask her for it. But I will be top of mind of hers.
Great. Well, sound advice. Well, this has been such a great conversation. Any final words about networking or talent development, or as you mentioned earlier, changing your own career or doing
Yeah.
different
Yeah. Networking will amplify your visibility. And you get to control the message when you do the networking. I see so many people that are very good at their job, but nobody knows who they are.
Yes.
So their name is not brought up in a room. You've got to network, even if you're an introvert and doing it one-on-one very gently. But if people know who you are and know what good you can do for the organization, they will bring your name up in a room when you're not in it.
Mhm.
And that's something you need to work on strategically, and it will make your life a lot easier and open doors for you.
Well, this has been such a great, powerful conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Mary McNevin. I really appreciate your time today and your sound advice. And I hope that all of us have learned something wonderful from you today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Stephen.
So, everyone, this was Dr. Mary McNevin on networking and sound steps and advice. And she had a model, which was fantastic. Again, Dr. McNevin is an executive coach, talent advisor, and she really is living her mission. And she spoke her mission about impacting lives through learning, networking, creating a competitive advantage through talent initiatives. So glad to have you. And thank you all for coming to my podcast, taking the next step in your career. This is designed to help you. Please feel free to look on social media, and I'm here to assist you at my organization, HRC Vision, Leadership and Learning. And then also, if you'd like to connect with Dr. McNevin for networking and the other initiatives that she's talked about, we are happy to do so. So thank you so much, everybody, for coming today.
You've been tuning in to Next Steps to Leadership with your host, Dr. Stephen Oliver. You can find this show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple Podcast, Spotify, and on our website, hrcvision.com. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others.